The trading station called Vega Nexus floated in the darkness of space like a giant metal flower. Ships came and went every hour, bringing aliens from dozens of different worlds. Some had scales, some had fur, and some looked like walking crystals. The station was a place where all these different beings could meet, trade, and talk without fighting. Kira Velshan walked through the wide corridors on her first day of work. She had blue skin that was almost white, and her large eyes took in everything around her. She was young, fresh out of the Galactic Academy, and excited to start her new job as a cultural liaison trainee. Her job was to help different species understand each other better. The orientation room was packed with other new workers. Kira sat in the front row, her datapad ready to take notes. An old Vraxian named Counselor Tarn stood at the front. His skin was gray and wrinkled, and his voice was slow and careful. He had worked on the station for 30 years and knew everything about every species that visited. Tarn went through the list of species one by one. He talked about the Vraxians, who valued honor above all else. He explained the Thrain, who never broke a promise. He described the Kaloran, who were traders and merchants. Each species had their own customs, their own rules, their own way of seeing the universe. Then Tarn got to the humans. The room became quiet. Even the air seemed to change. Kira noticed other trainees shifting in their seats, looking uncomfortable. Tarn's face became serious, almost grim. Humans were new to the galaxy. They had only learned how to travel faster than light 80 years ago. Most species had been traveling the stars for thousands of years before humanity even invented the wheel. But in those 80 short years, humans had made everyone nervous. Tarn pulled up images on the big screen. Earth, the human homeworld, appeared in blue and green. It looked beautiful from space, but Tarn explained that Earth was what the galaxy called a death world. The planet was full of dangers that would kill most other species in minutes. Earth had weather that could freeze you solid or cook you alive. It had animals with teeth as long as your arm. It had tiny creatures too small to see that could make you sick and kill you. It had plants that were poisonous to touch. And humans had evolved right in the middle of all that danger. That evolution made them different from most other species. Humans were persistence hunters, Tarn explained. They did not have sharp claws or tough armor. They could not run as fast as many animals. But they had something else. They never gave up. They could chase prey for hours, for days if needed, until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. Their bodies were built for endurance. They could go without sleep longer than most species. They healed fast from injuries that would leave others crippled. They had something called adrenaline that made them stronger and faster when they were scared or angry. And worst of all, they had forward-facing eyes like all predators, designed to track and hunt. But the physical traits were not what made other species fear humans. It was their history. Tarn showed images of human wars, thousands of years of humans fighting other humans. They had weapons that could level entire cities. They had fought wars that killed millions, and they had done all this to each other, to their own species, before they ever met aliens. When humans finally reached the stars and met their first alien species, it went badly. The Greshkan Empire had tried to claim a system that humans had already explored. The Greshkan had done what they always did. They showed their strength with a display of military power, expecting the humans to back down like everyone else did. The humans did not back down. They saw the military display as an attack. War broke out within hours. The Greshkan Empire had fought wars for centuries. They knew every tactic, every strategy. They expected to defeat these newcomers quickly. The war lasted 3 years. 3 years of the Greshkan learning that humans did not fight like other species. Humans used tactics that others considered dishonorable or crazy. They attacked from nowhere and disappeared. They never surrendered, even when surrounded. They adapted to every situation, learning and changing faster than the Greshkan could counter. A Greshkan commander had described fighting humans in a famous report. He said it was like fighting ghosts who could turn into demons. You never knew where they were until they wanted you to know. And when they attacked, they came with a fury that made no sense. They fought as if they had nothing to lose, even when they had everything to lose. The war ended when both sides were exhausted. A peace treaty was signed, but the galaxy had learned a lesson. Humans were dangerous, not just because they were strong or smart, but because they never quit. They would keep fighting long past the point where any other species would surrender. Tarn told more stories. A human marine who held a position alone against an entire enemy battalion for 18 hours. A human negotiator who made a warlord surrender just by looking at him and speaking calmly. a human scientist who survived 3 weeks on a frozen moon with no supplies, no heat, and no hope of rescue. Other trainees added their own stories, things they had heard from friends or family. Each story painted the same picture. Humans were relentless. They were unpredictable. They were capable of violence that made other species freeze in fear. And they smiled, showing their teeth, which every prey species in the galaxy recognized as a threat display. Tarn finished his lecture with advice. Be polite to humans. Be professional. Keep your distance. Never threaten them. Never corner them. Never make them think you are a danger to them or to anyone they are protecting. Humans were allies now, yes, but they were dangerous allies. Like having a trained predator on your side. Useful, but never completely safe. Kira left the orientation feeling worried. She had been excited about meeting different species and learning about their cultures. But now she had to work on a station with humans. Actual humans. The thought made her nervous in a way she had never felt before. That same day, during her tour of the station, she saw her first human. Lieutenant Jake Morrison was walking through one of the garden corridors. He was tall, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to notice everything. He wore the dark blue uniform of station security, and he moved with a smooth efficiency that reminded Kira of a hunting cat. Kira's special ability made it worse. As an Alteran, she could sense emotions and thoughts from other beings. Most species had minds that felt warm and open. She could sense their feelings easily. But Jake's mind was different. It was controlled, disciplined, locked down tight. Underneath the control, she sensed constant alertness. He was always watching, always ready, like a coiled spring waiting to release. Jake noticed her staring. He gave her a polite nod and kept walking. It was a friendly gesture meant to be reassuring. But Kira noticed things that made her heart beat faster. The way his eyes had scanned the entire corridor in the second before he looked at her. The way he moved without wasted motion. The way his hand stayed near his weapon, not touching it but ready. She stood frozen until he turned the corner and disappeared. Then she let out a breath she had not known she was holding. This was what Tarn had talked about. This was the reality of working with humans. They looked normal enough, almost friendly. But underneath they were predators, alert, ready, dangerous. That night in her small quarters, Kira could not sleep. She kept reviewing the files about humans. Every report said the same thing. Approach with caution. Maintain professional distance. Do not provoke. The files had statistics about human physical abilities, human psychology, human military tactics. Everything in the files screamed one message: be careful. She wondered what it would be like to come from a death world, to grow up surrounded by dangers that could kill you at any moment, to evolve in an environment where only the strongest and smartest survived. It would make anyone hard. It would make anyone dangerous. Kira decided to follow the advice in the files. She would be polite to humans. She would be professional, but she would keep her distance. It was the smart thing to do, the safe thing to do. She had no way of knowing that in just a few weeks, one of those dangerous humans would risk everything to save her life, and in doing so would teach her that she had understood nothing about humanity at all. 3 weeks passed on Vega Nexus, and Kira settled into her new routine. She worked long hours helping translate documents and facilitate conversations between different species. The job was challenging but rewarding. She was learning more every day about how the galaxy worked, about trade agreements and cultural exchanges, and the delicate dance of diplomacy. She saw Jake Morrison regularly during those weeks. The station was large, but their paths crossed often. He worked security in the diplomatic wing where she spent most of her time. Each time she saw him, she felt that same nervous tension. But she also noticed other things. Jake was popular with many of the station workers. She watched him help an elderly Vraxian carry heavy boxes. She saw him patiently explain directions to a confused Thrain visitor. She heard other security officers speak highly of him. He arrived early for every shift. He never complained. He treated everyone with the same professional courtesy. Once, Kira saw him break up a fight between two drunk traders without violence. He had simply stepped between them, said something in a calm voice, and both traders had backed down immediately. Whatever they saw in his eyes had convinced them that fighting was a bad idea. Later, Kira heard one of the traders describing Jake to his friend. The human has a dangerous look, the trader said. Like he knows exactly how to hurt you but chooses not to. Smart people do not push humans. But Kira still kept her distance. The warnings from orientation stayed fresh in her mind. Humans might act friendly, but they were still dangerous. She could sense it every time Jake was near. That controlled alertness, that coiled readiness. He was like a weapon that walked around in a uniform, and weapons were not safe no matter how polite they seemed. During the third week, tensions began rising on the station. A trade dispute between the Kaloran Consortium and the Thrain Collective was getting worse. Both groups claimed rights to a mining system in disputed space. Negotiations were not going well. More ships arrived each day, carrying officials and guards and lawyers. The diplomatic wing became crowded and tense. Kira got assigned to help with communications. She spent 12-hour days translating documents and helping the two sides understand each other's positions. It was exhausting work. Both sides were angry and stubborn. Both sides believed they were right. Finding common ground seemed impossible. The station administrator increased security. More guards patrolled the corridors. Weapons scanners were installed at checkpoints. Jake's team started working double shifts. Kira saw him more often. Always moving through the diplomatic wing, always watching, always ready. The tension affected everyone. Arguments broke out over small things. People were scared that the dispute might turn violent. On the 24th day, Kira was in a conference room reviewing contracts. The room was small and quiet, a nice break from the chaos outside. She was alone, focused on her work, trying to find a compromise buried in the legal language. The documents were complex and boring, but someone had to read them. The explosion came without warning. The floor jumped beneath her feet. The walls shook. Kira fell from her chair, hitting the ground hard. Her ears rang with a high-pitched whine. For a moment she could not understand what had happened. Then the alarm started screaming. The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. Kira pulled herself up, her legs shaking. Smoke was coming from somewhere. She could smell burning plastic and something worse. She stumbled to the door and opened it. The corridor outside was chaos. People were running and screaming. Some were injured, bleeding from cuts caused by flying debris. Others just looked terrified. The smoke was thicker here, making it hard to breathe. Kira put her hand over her mouth and tried to think. She needed to get to the evacuation points. She needed to get somewhere safe. A second explosion hit, closer this time. The blast knocked Kira off her feet again. She hit the wall and tasted blood. Her tongue hurt where she had bitten it. Her vision blurred. She lay on the floor for several seconds, trying to remember how to breathe. When her head cleared, she realized something terrible. Through her telepathic senses, she could feel minds nearby. Angry minds. Minds full of hate and determination. Someone was attacking the station. Someone was hunting through the corridors looking for people to kill. And they were getting closer. Kira forced herself to stand. She had to move. She had to run. But when she looked down the corridor toward the evacuation points, she saw the path was blocked. Ceiling panels had collapsed. Twisted metal blocked the way. She could not get through. She turned and ran the other direction, hoping to find another route. She ran past offices and storage rooms, past emergency stations and supply closets. Behind her, she heard voices speaking Kaloran. The attackers were following her path. They were checking every room, every hiding spot. They were being systematic and thorough. They would find her eventually. Kira reached a dead end. The corridor simply stopped at a sealed security door. She pulled on the handle, but it would not open. The power was out and the door was locked. She was trapped. She could hear the voices getting closer. She could sense their minds burning with the kind of rage that made people do terrible things. She tried the door again, pulling with all her strength. Nothing. The metal did not even budge. Her hearts were pounding so hard she thought they might burst. She looked around desperately for somewhere to hide, somewhere to wait until help arrived. But the corridor was empty except for her. There was a damaged office nearby. The door was half open. Inside, furniture was scattered from the explosions. Kira slipped inside and crouched behind an overturned desk. It was not much protection. Anyone who looked closely would see her. But it was all she had. She tried to control her breathing, tried to stay quiet, tried not to cry. But fear was taking over. Her telepathic ability, usually so useful, now felt like a curse. She could sense the attackers clearly now. 4 of them moving as a group. They were checking each room carefully. They carried weapons. They had already killed people. She could sense the fresh blood on their hands. sensed their satisfaction at having done their duty. These were not soldiers following orders. These were fanatics who believed in their cause completely. They thought they were doing the right thing. They thought killing was justified. That made them more dangerous than any soldier. Soldiers might hesitate. Fanatics never did. Footsteps approached her hiding place. Heavy boots on metal floor. The sound echoed in the damaged corridor. Kira pressed herself against the wall, making herself as small as possible. She closed her eyes as if not seeing them would somehow make her invisible. The footsteps stopped outside the office. She heard voices conferring in Kaloran. They were deciding whether to check this room or move on. Kira held her breath. Please move on, she thought. Please just keep going. Please do not find me. The door creaked as someone pushed it fully open. Light from a hand torch swept across the room. Kira squeezed her eyes shut tighter, as if darkness could protect her. The footsteps entered the room. One person, walking slowly, checking carefully. She could sense his mind now. Cold, focused, determined. He had killed 3 people already today and felt no guilt about it. He would kill her too as easily as swatting an insect. Her life meant nothing to him. She was just an obstacle to remove. The footsteps came closer. The torchlight grew brighter. Kira knew she was about to die. She thought about her family on her home world. She thought about all the things she would never do, all the places she would never see. She thought about how stupid she had been to take this job. She should have stayed home where it was safe. A shadow fell across her hiding spot. The attacker had found her. Kira opened her eyes and looked up at the Kaloran standing over her. He raised his weapon, pointing it at her head. His finger moved toward the trigger. This was the end. 23 years old and dying alone in a damaged office on a space station far from home. Kira wanted to scream, but her voice would not work. She could only stare at the weapon pointed at her face and wait for the end to come. The attacker's finger tightened on the trigger. In another second, she would be dead. 3 levels above where Kira was hiding, Jake Morrison felt the first explosion through the station floor. He was conducting a routine security sweep when the blast hit. Most people would have frozen in shock. Jake's training took over instantly. His mind shifted into combat mode, processing information and making decisions faster than thought. He activated his helmet comm immediately. Reports started flooding in. Multiple explosions in the diplomatic wing, casualties, fires, structural damage. Armed hostiles moving through the damaged sections. It was a coordinated terrorist attack, carefully planned and brutally executed. Jake coordinated with his team while he moved. He sent officers to secure the main evacuation routes. He ordered others to protect critical systems. He organized rescue teams to search for survivors. His voice stayed calm and professional even as his mind raced through scenarios and contingencies. Good leadership in a crisis was not about panicking louder than everyone else. Then a report came through that made his blood run cold. Armed hostiles were hunting survivors in the diplomatic wing. They were not just setting bombs and running. They were actively hunting people down and killing them. The body count was already at 15 and climbing. Local security was scattered and overwhelmed. Jake made his decision in 2 seconds. He grabbed additional equipment from a security locker. Extra power cells for his weapon, a medical kit, emergency breathing apparatus. His team leader's voice came through the comm, ordering him to wait for backup before entering the danger zone. Jake acknowledged the order. Then he kept moving toward the diplomatic wing anyway. Some situations could not wait for backup. People were dying right now. Every second he delayed meant another life lost. He had not become a security officer to stand around being safe while others died. The damaged corridors were a nightmare. Smoke hung thick in the air. Emergency lights cast everything in blood red. Debris blocked some passages, forcing Jake to find alternate routes. He moved fast but carefully, his weapon ready, his senses alert for any threat. This was not his first combat zone. He knew how to stay alive when everything was trying to kill you. He found bodies along the way. Station workers who had been caught in the explosions or shot while trying to flee. Jake cataloged each death, locking the information away to process later. Right now he needed to focus. Grief could come after. First he had to make sure there was an after for as many people as possible. His helmet display showed heat signatures ahead, 4 hostiles moving in formation. checking rooms one by one, and behind a door nearby, one faint signature. Someone was hiding there, someone terrified and alone. The hostiles were about to find them. Jake did the math instantly. 4 armed opponents, close quarters combat, no backup. The smart play was to wait for support. The smart play would guarantee whoever was hiding in that room would die. Jake had never been very good at making the smart play when lives were at stake. He moved closer, staying silent. The hostiles were focused on the room they were checking. They did not see him approach. Jake reached inside himself and accessed the part he normally kept locked down, the part that had been trained in a dozen different combat schools, the part that had fought on 3 different worlds, the part that made other species call humans dangerous. Jake hit them like a storm. The first hostile went down before he even registered Jake's presence. A precise strike to the weapon arm that shattered bone. The weapon clattered to the floor. Jake was already moving to the second target. A stunning blow to the nerve cluster near the neck. The Kaloran dropped like a puppet with cut strings. The third and fourth hostiles tried to react. They were trained soldiers, not random thugs. But they were too slow. Jake was already inside their weapon range, too close for them to shoot without hitting each other. He used that against them. A disarming technique that left the third hostile unconscious on the floor. A joint lock that put the fourth hostile down hard. The entire fight took 8 seconds. Jake's hands were shaking slightly from the adrenaline surge. His heart pounded. A cut above his eye was bleeding where one of the hostiles had managed to land a glancing blow. But he was alive, and the hostiles were not. That was all that mattered. He quickly secured the unconscious hostiles with security cuffs. Then he approached the door where the heat signature was hiding. He knocked gently, not wanting to scare whoever was inside more than they already were. No response. Jake opened the door carefully and stepped inside. The room was a mess from the explosions. Furniture overturned, papers scattered everywhere. And behind an overturned desk pressed against the wall was a young Altaran female with pale blue skin and terrified eyes. Jake recognized her immediately. The cultural liaison trainee he had seen around the station. She looked absolutely terrified, frozen in place, staring at him like he might kill her. Jake realized how he must look, covered in dust and blood, fresh from a violent fight. His weapon still in his hand. To her, he probably looked more dangerous than the terrorists. He holstered his weapon immediately and held up both hands, palms open. The universal gesture of peace. He made his voice as gentle as possible, trying to sound non-threatening despite the circumstances. "It's okay. You're safe now. I'm with station security. My name is Jake Morrison. We need to get you out of here." She stared at him, not moving. Jake could see the conflict in her eyes. She was terrified of him. That hurt, but he understood. Humans had a reputation, especially humans who had just taken down 4 armed opponents in seconds. He needed to make her understand he was not a threat to her. He took a slow step closer, moving like he was approaching a frightened animal. "Can you walk? Are you injured?" He scanned her visually, looking for obvious wounds. She had some cuts and bruises, but nothing that looked life-threatening. "What's your name?" "Kira," she whispered. Her voice was shaking. "Kira Velshan." "Okay, Kira. I know you're scared. That's normal. Anyone would be scared after what just happened. But I need you to trust me right now. There are more hostiles in this area. We need to move to somewhere safe. Can you do that?" She nodded slowly. Jake offered his hand to help her up. She hesitated for a long moment before taking it. Her hand was small and cold in his. He helped her to her feet gently, making sure she was steady before letting go. "Stay close to me," Jake said. "Follow my instructions exactly. If I tell you to hide, you hide. If I tell you to run, you run. Understand?" "I understand," Kira said. She looked at the unconscious hostiles in the corridor. "You fought all of them alone?" "They were not expecting me," Jake said simply. "Surprise is a powerful weapon. Come on, we need to move." They moved through the damaged corridors together. Jake led the way, his weapon ready, his helmet display showing him heat signatures and structural damage. He communicated constantly with his team through the comm, coordinating their extraction route. Backup was coming, but they were still minutes away. Minutes could feel like hours in a combat zone. Kira stayed close behind him. Jake could hear her breathing, fast and scared but steady. She was holding together well, considering what she had just been through. Not everyone could keep functioning after almost dying. She was stronger than she looked. They were almost to the evacuation point when Jake's helmet display lit up with warnings. Multiple heat signatures ahead, more behind them. They were being flanked. The hostiles had regrouped and were now systematically cutting off escape routes. Jake and Kira were caught between two groups with no clear way out. Jake swore under his breath and pulled Kira into a side passage. He checked his weapon. Not enough. Power cells for a sustained fight against that many opponents. His helmet display showed the tactical situation clearly. They were trapped. He needed to find a solution fast. Then he saw it. A maintenance shaft 20 meters ahead. It led to the outer ring where his team could retrieve Kira. It was a way out. But only for one person. The shaft was too small for him in his armor, and someone would need to hold this position to give her time to escape. Someone would need to stay behind and face impossible odds. Jake looked at Kira and made his decision. He knew what he had to do. Jake studied the maintenance shaft entrance. It was their only option. He turned to Kira, keeping his voice calm and steady, even though his mind was racing through calculations. All of them pointed to the same conclusion. This was going to be a one-way trip for him. There's a maintenance shaft 20 meters ahead, he said, pointing. It leads to the outer ring. You can use it to reach safety. My team will pick you up there. Kira looked at the shaft, then back at Jake. Her eyes widened as she understood what he was saying. What about you? I'll hold them here, Jake said. He pulled out a small beacon device from his equipment belt and handed it to her. Give you time to get clear. Activate this once you're in the shaft. The beacon will guide my team to your location. They'll get you to safety. No, Kira said, shaking her head. You can't, there are too many of them. You said so yourself. You'll die. Jake had expected this reaction. People always argued when you told them you were going to sacrifice yourself for them. They did not understand that sometimes sacrifice was the only logical choice. Maybe I will, but you'll definitely die if I don't do this. And I didn't come all this way just to watch you die now. This is crazy, Kira said. Tears started running down her face. You barely know me. We've never even had a real conversation. Why would you die for a stranger? Jake checked his weapon, counting the remaining power cells. Not enough. Never enough. But that was okay. He had trained for situations like this. Situations where the only thing you had was determination and the willingness to use it. Because it's the right thing to do. Because your life matters. Because someone needs to stand between you and the people trying to kill you. He met her eyes. She needed to understand this. All those stories you heard about humans being ruthless killers? They're not wrong. We can be incredibly violent when we need to be, but those stories miss something important. They miss the other half of what makes us human. What other half? Kira asked. We're also fiercely protective of those we choose to defend, Jake said. We don't just fight to destroy our enemies. We fight to protect people who can't protect themselves. That's why most of us became soldiers in the first place. Not because we love violence. Because we hate seeing innocent people hurt. It's what makes us human instead of just monsters. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed from both directions. The hostiles were closing in. Jake had maybe a minute before they arrived. He gently pushed Kira toward the maintenance shaft. Now go, run. Make this sacrifice mean something. Live a good life. That's all I ask. I can't just leave you here, Kira protested. Yes, you can, Jake said firmly. And you will. Because if you stay here, we both die. If you go, at least one of us survives. I'm a soldier. This is literally what I signed up for. You're a cultural liaison. You have a whole life ahead of you. The math is simple. The footsteps were getting louder. Voices called out in Kaloran, coordinating their approach. They would be here in seconds. Jake positioned himself in the corridor, placing his body between Kira and both directions the hostiles would come from. He checked his weapon one last time. He adjusted his armor. He took a deep breath and settled into a combat stance. Go, he said without looking back at her. Right now. That's an order. Kira hesitated one more moment. Through her telepathic abilities, she could sense Jake's mind. He was scared. Of course he was scared. Only an idiot would not be scared facing these odds. But underneath the fear was something stronger, a determination that would not break, a commitment that would not waver. He had made his choice and nothing would change it. She ran. It was the hardest thing she had ever done, turning her back on someone who was about to die for her. But she ran because he had asked her to, because staying would waste his sacrifice, because he was right about the math even if the math was terrible. Behind her, she heard the battle start, the sharp crack of energy weapons, shouts in multiple languages, the heavy impact sounds of close combat. Jake was fighting alone against impossible odds, fighting to give her the time she needed to escape. Kira reached the maintenance shaft and pulled herself inside. It was narrow and dark. She had to crawl on her hands and knees. She activated the beacon like Jake had told her to. A small light started blinking. Somewhere above, his team would see the signal and come for her. She crawled forward but could not help herself. She reached out with her telepathic abilities, sensing back toward Jake. She knew she should not. Knowing what was happening to him would just make it worse. But she needed to know. She needed to witness what he was doing for her. What she felt shocked her. There was fear, yes, sharp and bright as he faced overwhelming odds. There was pain as enemy fire found its mark. Burns on his arm. A deep cut on his leg. His body was taking damage. But stronger than the fear and pain was purpose. Pure, unshakable purpose. Jake knew he was probably going to die. He had accepted that fact. But he felt no regret, no anger at the universe for putting him in this situation. He had chosen this. He had placed himself between danger and someone who needed protection. In his mind, that made everything worth it. Every bullet, every wound, every second he held this position. Kira felt tears streaming down her face as she crawled through the maintenance shaft. She understood now. Everything she had been taught about humans was both completely true and catastrophically incomplete. Yes, humans were dangerous. Yes, they were capable of terrible violence. Yes, they were predators from a death world who never gave up and never surrendered. But that violence was not their nature. It was their tool. Humans chose when to be violent. They chose what to protect. They chose who deserved their loyalty and their sacrifice. And once they made that choice, nothing could make them abandon it. Not fear, not pain, not even death. The galaxy had judged humans by their capacity for destruction. But it should have been judging them by their capacity for protection. By their willingness to stand and fight when running would be easier. By their choice to sacrifice themselves for others, even when those others were strangers from alien species. Kira emerged from the maintenance shaft into the outer ring. Hands grabbed her immediately. Security personnel in familiar uniforms, human security personnel. A woman with short brown hair and a lieutenant's insignia helped pull Kira to her feet. "Are you injured?" the woman asked, checking Kira quickly for wounds. "Jake," Kira said. "Lieutenant Morrison. He's still back there. He's holding them off alone. There are too many of them. You have to help him." The woman's face became grim. "We know, we're tracking his location. Backup is on the way. I'm Lieutenant Kate Barnes. Come on, we need to get you to safety." "Is he going to die?" Kira asked. Barnes hesitated. Then she decided to be honest. "I don't know. Jake's tough and well-trained. But those are bad odds even for him. All we can do is get there as fast as possible and hope he can hold on until we arrive." They rushed Kira to a safe area. Medical personnel checked her over while she sat in shock. She could still sense Jake in the back of her mind. Still fighting. Still holding that impossible position. Minutes passed like hours. Each second felt like an eternity. Then Barnes's comm crackled to life. Voices reported that backup had reached Jake's position. The hostiles were retreating. Jake was down but alive. They were bringing him out now. Kira felt weak with relief. Alive. He was alive. Barely alive from what she could sense, but alive. That dangerous, violent, terrifying human had risked everything to save her. Had stood alone against 15 armed enemies to buy her time to escape. Had held that position for 8 minutes of brutal combat, even though every tactical calculation said it was impossible. He had done the impossible because someone needed protecting. Because it was the right thing to do. Because he was human. Kira insisted on seeing Jake. The medical staff tried to refuse. He was in critical condition, they said. He needed rest. Visitors would disturb his recovery. But something in Kira's expression made them change their minds. This was not just casual concern. This was someone who needed to see with her own eyes that he was alive. They took her to the medical wing. Jake was in a regeneration pod, surrounded by machines that hummed and beeped steadily. His body was wrapped in white bandages that glowed faintly as they worked to heal his injuries. Even unconscious, his face held that same determined expression, like he was still fighting even in his dreams. A human doctor approached Kira. He looked tired, like he had been working for hours without rest. "He's lucky to be alive," the doctor said quietly. "Severe burns on his right arm. Deep lacerations on both legs. Cracked ribs, concussion, but he'll recover. Humans are tough. We heal from things that would kill most species. Give him a few weeks in the regeneration pod and he'll be back on his feet." "Can I stay with him?" Kira asked. The doctor looked surprised. Then he smiled slightly. "Sure, talk to him if you want. Unconscious patients can sometimes hear voices. It might help his recovery." Over the following weeks, Kira spent hours in the medical wing. She sat beside Jake's pod and talked to him. She told him about her homeworld, about her family, about her dreams for the future. She did not know if he could hear her, but she talked anyway. It felt important somehow, like she owed him this small comfort after what he had done for her. She also talked to other humans during those weeks. She learned their stories. She discovered that Jake's actions, while extraordinary, were not unique among his people. Human history was full of stories like his. People who threw themselves on grenades to save their squad. People who ran into burning buildings to rescue strangers. People who stood between the helpless and those who would harm them, again and again throughout their entire existence as a species. Lieutenant Barnes shared stories over coffee one day. She told Kira about human soldiers who had held impossible positions to give civilians time to evacuate. About human firefighters who died rescuing people from collapsing structures. About human civilians who had stood up to armed criminals to protect others. The stories went on, a pattern repeated throughout human history. "We're not saints," Barnes said. "Humans do terrible things too. We've fought wars. We've committed atrocities. We're capable of cruelty and violence. But we're also capable of incredible selflessness. Both exist in us at the same time. The difference is choice. We choose which part of ourselves to show." Kira began to understand. The same evolutionary pressures that made humans dangerous also made them capable of extraordinary sacrifice. They had evolved in small tribal groups where individual sacrifice could ensure the survival of the whole group. That instinct had not disappeared when they reached for the stars. If anything, they had expanded their definition of tribe to include anyone they deemed worthy of protection. On the 18th day, Jake woke up. Kira was there when his eyes opened. He looked confused for a moment, trying to remember where he was. Then he saw her and smiled weakly. His voice was hoarse when he spoke. "You made it, good." Tears started running down Kira's face again.
"You almost died for me."
"I didn't understand before. I thought humans were just dangerous. I didn't realize you were dangerous because you choose to stand between danger and others." Jake shrugged carefully, mindful of his healing injuries. "I'm not special. Any member of my team would have done the same thing. It's what we train for, what we believe in." "That's where you're wrong," Kira said firmly. "It is special. Most species would have calculated the odds and chosen self-preservation. You chose sacrifice instead. That's not just training. That's character. That's what makes you who you are." She reached out carefully and took his hand. "I want to understand humans better. Real understanding. Not the fear-based information they teach in orientation. Would you help me learn?" Jake squeezed her hand gently. "I'd like that. Fair warning, though, we're complicated, capable of great kindness and terrible cruelty. Sometimes in the same person, sometimes on the same day." "I know," Kira said, "but I want to understand anyway. The galaxy needs to understand. We've been judging you based on incomplete information." In the months that followed, Kira became an advocate for changing how other species viewed humanity. She wrote reports about her experience. She gave lectures at diplomatic conferences. She shared her telepathic testimony, which carried a weight that mere words could never match. She had sensed Jake's mind during his sacrifice. She knew the truth in a way no one could fake or exaggerate. Yes, she told other species humans are dangerous. They evolved as persistence hunters on a death world. They're capable of extraordinary violence when necessary. But that's not the complete story. Their capacity for violence exists to serve their capacity for protection. They don't fight because they're cruel or bloodthirsty. They fight because they care deeply about protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Humans survive their harsh world, not just through individual strength, but through cooperation, loyalty, and willingness to sacrifice for the group. Those same traits followed them to the stars. Where other species saw bloodthirsty predators, they should see fierce protectors. Where they saw dangerous monsters, they should see potential guardians. The galaxy was slowly beginning to listen. Humanity was not going away. They had claimed their place among the stars, and they were staying. Other species needed to understand them properly, not as threats to be feared and avoided, but as allies worth having, as beings who would stand beside you when danger came, as people who understood that sometimes the right choice was the hard choice. Jake recovered fully and returned to duty after 6 weeks. He and Kira had become close friends during his recovery. Over time, that friendship became something more. They started spending their free time together, walking through the garden corridors, sharing meals, learning about each other's worlds and cultures. Their relationship became a symbol on the station, a bridge between species, proof that understanding could replace fear. Other station personnel noticed the change. Humans were no longer avoided in the corridors. Other species started asking them questions instead of just being nervous around them. Slowly, the atmosphere shifted from wariness to respect. On the anniversary of the terrorist attack, the station held a memorial service. All the species working on Vega Nexus attended. They honored those who had died. They remembered the violence and chaos of that terrible day. And they recognized those who had shown courage when it mattered most. Jake stood among the survivors, uncomfortable with the attention. He did not think he deserved special recognition. He had simply done what needed doing, what any soldier would do. The real heroes were the people who died, the ones who did not get to go home to their families. He was just lucky to be alive, but Kira understood something Jake did not. Not every human would have made his choice. Not every soldier would have stayed behind. But enough of them would, enough to make humanity valuable allies, enough to make them worth understanding and respecting instead of fearing, enough to change how the galaxy saw them. She stood beside him during the ceremony, holding his hand. Around them, species from dozens of worlds paid their respects to the fallen. The galaxy was learning. Slowly, painfully, but learning. Humans were not monsters. They were not mindless killers. They were people who made hard choices. People who stood and fought when others ran. People who sacrificed themselves for strangers because it was right. The bloodthirsty humans of galactic legend were real. They existed. Their capacity for violence was not exaggerated. But the legend was incomplete. It missed the most important part. Humans were bloodthirsty only in defense of those they chose to protect, and their definition of who deserved protection was surprisingly broad. They protected their families naturally, their friends and communities, their nations and their species, but they also protected strangers, people they had never met, people from alien worlds with alien customs. They protected anyone who needed protecting, anyone who was helpless in the face of danger. That was what made them special. That was what made them human. Years later, when Kira told the story of that day to young diplomats in training, she always ended the same way. She would describe Jake standing alone in that corridor, facing impossible odds, choosing sacrifice over survival. Then she would look at her students and say something that had become her motto. Humans are dangerous, yes. Never forget that. Their capacity for violence is real, but judge them not by their ability to destroy, but by their willingness to protect. Judge them by what they choose to fight for, not just how they fight. Because in the end, that choice makes all the difference. That choice is what separates a monster from a hero. And humanity has shown us again and again which one they choose to be. The galaxy was still learning to understand humans. It would take time. Generations, perhaps. But the lesson was clear for those willing to see it. Humanity had earned their place among the stars not through conquest or intimidation, but through the same quality Jake had demonstrated in a burning corridor on a damaged space station. The choice to stand and fight when retreat would have been easier. The choice to protect others at the cost of their own safety. The choice to be more than just dangerous. The choice to be good.